Greetings to each and everyone. We are here today to deliver our case study about the evolution of Philippine institutions. And this case study will explore the historical background, significance, strengths, and weaknesses of each of the major Philippine constitution. So let's start with the 1899 Malolos Constitution. So as you can see, the Malolos Constitution, enacted in 1899, marked a pivotal moment in Philippine history. It represented the first attempt to establish an independent republic in Asia, symbolizing the Filipino people's desires for self-rule and resistance to Spanish colonialism. So the constitution was drafted by the Revolutionary Congress in Malolos, Bulacan, under the leadership of Emilio Aguinaldo, who became the first president of the Philippines. It aimed to provide a legal and political framework for the newly formed republic, following the Declaration of Independence on June 12, 1898. So next we have here the significance. So the Malolos Constitution championed democratic principles, including the separation of powers and protection of individual freedoms. It was inspired by Enlightenment ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, and laid the foundation for future Philippine constitutions by promoting a republican form of government and representative democracy. Next, we have here the strengths. So the Constitution established a separation of church and state, promoting religious freedom and ensuring governance free from religious influence. It also provided for free public education at the elementary level and protected Filipino lives, homes, and properties, demonstrating a commitment to public welfare and development. So the Malolos Constitution outlined clear executive, legislative, and judicial branches with a notable emphasis on legislative power. So this legislative supremacy aimed to foster checks and balances, but also highlighted the unique approach of the first Philippine Republic in ensuring democratic representation. Additionally, Article 18 ensured fair taxation by prohibiting arbitrary taxation, upholding fiscal responsibility, and protecting citizens. So next we have here the weaknesses. So the Malolos Constitution faced several challenges. Its emphasis on legislative supremacy sometimes limited the effectiveness of the executive and judiciary. The republic lacked military and economic stability, making it vulnerable during the Philippine-American War. So the Malolos Republic was short-lived, lasting only 2 years before Aguinaldo was captured by American forces in year 1901. So the constitution also lacked international recognition, limiting its influence and diplomatic efficacy. And lastly, we have here the end. The collapse of the Malolos Republic occurred on March 31, 1899, when American forces captured the capital Malolos. Despite the loss of the capital, President Aguinaldo continued the resistance, but ultimately the American military pressure and strategic superiority overwhelmed the republic. The fall of Malolos marked the collapse of the Malolos Constitution and the first Philippine Republic, which was unable to withstand the external and internal challenges it faced. So the Malolos Constitution, despite its short lifespan, remains a significant symbol of Filipino aspiration for independence and self-governance. It serves a reminder of the struggles and triumphs in the Philippines' journey towards nationhood. So now let's move on to the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution. Let's hear from Miss Alvi. Miss Alvi.
All right, thank you. Following the 1899 Malolos Constitution is the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution. It originated from the Tidings-McDuffie Act of 1934, a U.S. law that promised future independence for the Philippines. This law required the creation of a government framework to help the Philippines transition from being a U.S. colony to an independent nation. So it took effect in 1935, starting the Philippine Commonwealth period, a 10-year phase of self-rule under the U.S. supervision. Its significance: the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution of the Philippines was the country's first independent constitution, created with the guidance from the United States. The Constitution set up a government similar to the U.S. system, with separate branches and aimed to balance self-rule with a transition period under U.S. supervision. The Constitution had several strengths. It set up a system with 3 branches of government: the executive, legislative, and the judicial. It is to maintain the balance of power. It also protected basic rights such as freedom of speech and the press through a Bill of Rights. The Constitution helped unite Filipinos and gave them pride as they worked toward independence. However, it limited the Philippines' freedom in foreign matters, with the US still in control of military and international affairs that is to be considered the weakness of this constitution. This constitution helped lead the Philippines to full independence in 1946, marking a smooth transition from colonial rule to self-governance. It also influenced later Philippine constitutions, providing a strong foundation for democracy and citizens' rights. Coming after the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution is the 1973 Philippine Constitution. It was a transformative document that altered the nation's government structure and governance approach. It was enacted during the rule of former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. This constitution was crafted under the pretext of addressing the nation's internal security challenges, such as communist insurgency and social unrest. However, it functioned primarily as a means for Marcos to maintain and legitimize his hold on power beyond his lawful presidential terms. This constitution not only changed the government structure from a presidential to a parliamentary system, but also centralized authority, marking the start of an authoritarian rule. The 1973 Constitution's significance lies in its restructuring of the government, merging the executive and legislative powers, and creating a parliamentary system with a prime minister who, in theory, could be appointed and removed by the National Assembly. However, this parliamentary form was never fully implemented. Instead, Marcos continued to rule by decree, invoking amendments that allowed him to exercise extensive powers without meaningful checks. These provisions allowed him to consolidate power, enact laws, control the military, and suspend basic freedoms, which made him effectively become both the president and the prime minister within the interim of Batasang Pambansa or the National Assembly. This led to the suppression of democratic processes and the erosion of civil liberties. The 1973 Constitution was largely theoretical. It centered around the possibility of streamlined governance. The parliamentary system, by design, allowed for swift decision making, which theoretically could address issues of national importance without the delay of a bicameral legislative process. This system also provided Marcos with the legal framework to swiftly implement economic programs and maintain stability, theoretically reducing internal conflict. However, its strengths were overshadowed by the manner in which the Constitution was used to consolidate Marcos' control. The Constitution granted the executive branch unchecked control over the legislative and judicial branches, leading to widespread censorship, political repression, military involvement in political questions, and human rights abuses. Freedom of the press was also severely curtailed and citizens were denied basic political rights. The centralized power structure also led to rampant corruption as Marcos and his allies accumulated wealth and resources, diverting public funds for personal gain while the majority of the Filipinos suffered economic hardship. So economic stagnation and poverty increased as public funds were misused. So by concentrating authority in a single leader, the 1973 Constitution stifled public participation and accountability, leading to an era marked by corruption and civil rights violations. So the downfall of the 1973 Constitution began in the early 1980s as economic decline, human rights abuses, and political corruption fueled public dissatisfaction. Widespread dissent became more visible following the assassination of the opposition leader Benigno Aquino Jr. in 1983, which ignited mass protest and international condemnation. So Aquino's death led to increased domestic and international pressure on the Marcos regime, culminating in the 1986 snap elections, which were marred by allegations of fraud. The call for reform and a return to democracy led to the People Power Revolution of the 1986, when public unrest and military defiance forced Marcos into exile. So in February 25, 1986, with Corazon Aquino's ascent to presidency, the 1973 Constitution was effectively replaced and a new democratic constitution was drafted in 1987 to restore democratic governance. And this constitution will be discussed by Ms. Tapik.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Umbao. So we have next in line the 1987 Constitution. Okay, so this constitution remains unamended to this day, and the historical background of this constitution is that it was ratified on February 2, 1987, following the People Power Revolution of 1986, which ended the authoritarian rule of Ferdinand Marcos and restored democracy. So the significance of this constitution lies in its emphasis on democratization, civil liberties, and decentralization. So it played a crucial role in restoring democratic processes and ensuring the fair distribution of power after years of centralized governance. So by safeguarding civil liberties, it prioritized the protection of individual rights such as freedom of speech, religion, and equal protection under the law. And also, additionally, its focus on decentralization empowered local government units, promoting autonomy and inclusivity in governance, which allowed communities to actively participate in decision making and development. So, this constitution symbolizes a commitment to democracy, human rights, and a balanced governance. So the strengths of this constitution include, first, it restored separation of powers and Bill of Rights. So it restores the separation of powers among the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches and reinforces the independence of constitutional bodies such as Commission on Elections, Commission on Audit, and Civil Service Commission to prevent any single branch from consolidating power. So furthermore, it includes a robust Bill of Rights, which emphasizes the protection of individual rights and social justice by prioritizing the needs of marginalized sectors, including provisions for agrarian and urban land reform, and safeguarding the rights of women, indigenous peoples, and other vulnerable groups. So second, it promoted local autonomy and participatory governance. So the Constitution includes provisions to enhance local autonomy, allowing local governments more control over regional issues and to promote participatory governance, correcting the centralized governance of the Marcos era. So despite its strong foundations, the Constitution has certain weaknesses. So a prominent issue is the ineffective anti-dynasty provision, which, due to the absence of enabling legislation, has not curtailed the influence of political dynasties, allowing elite families to dominate politics. Additionally, the party list system intended to provide representation for marginalized sectors has sometimes been co-opted by powerful political entities, limiting its effectiveness. So while the Constitution emphasizes judicial independence, political influence and resource limitations have occasionally hindered the judiciary's ability to function as an impartial and strong check on the other branches of government. So today, there are calls for constitutional reform to address these persistent challenges. Proposals include shifting to a federal system, strengthening provisions against political dynasties, and enhancing local autonomy to balance development across regions. So the 1987 Constitution, which remains in effect today, stands as a testament to the Philippines' efforts to build a just democratic society after decades of authoritarian rule. However, ongoing discussions about constitutional reform reflect the need to adapt to contemporary political and social realities to ensure that it continues to serve the people effectively. So that's it for our case study about the significant role of the Constitution and its historical evolution of the Philippine Constitution. So the Philippine constitutions such as the 1899, the 1935, 1973, and 1987 reflect the nation's evolving journey towards sovereignty, democracy, and governance, each addressing the needs of its time. While they have strengths, they also reveal weaknesses. Furthermore, each constitution represents a critical step in shaping the country's political and legal framework, reflecting the aspirations and challenges of its respective era. Thank you so much for listening and have a good day.